You ever watch someone's dream day implode so spectacularly you couldn't look away, even if you tried? I'm talking about a wedding so perfectly planned it should have been a fairy tale, but ended in a chaos no one saw coming. I was there, sort of, watching every brutal second from miles away with a glass of champagne in hand. Trust me, you're gonna want to hear how it all unraveled in real time. Buckle up, because this isn't the kind of family drama you can just skip past. My name's Madison. I'm 27, living in Denver, Colorado, and last Saturday, I watched my older sister's wedding crash and burn in real time, from my cheap IKEA couch with a glass of warm champagne in my hand. I'd been told it was better if I just watched it online, so that's exactly what I did. I clicked the link expecting polished perfection, but what I got was raw, unfiltered destruction. My screen froze on the moment everything fell apart, leaving her face, red, tear-streaked, defiant, stuck there like a painting of heartbreak. It was supposed to be her fairy tale, you know. The culmination of months of planning, family group chats filled with venue photos and passive-aggressive comments about floral arrangements. My parents had spent so much money to prove to everyone how perfect we were. I guess they never expected the live stream would immortalize their downfall. I watched it unfold, feeling like I was intruding on something too intimate to witness. But I couldn't look away. My hands trembled around my champagne flute as guests screamed, glass shattered, and accusations flew across a ballroom I'd only seen in photos. It was like watching a train wreck you can't stop even though you know you should turn your head. And all I could think was, this is my family. This is us. Not the perfect photos, not the curated smiles. This was the real version, uglier and far more honest. When the screen froze on my sister's face, it felt like the universe was telling me, enough. You don't need to see more. But the damage was already done. That single image burned itself into my brain, a monument to everything we never said to each other, to the truth that had finally boiled over in public. I sat there in stunned silence, realizing how badly we'd all failed her, how badly I'd failed her. I'm not sharing this because I want pity or drama points. I'm telling you because I think you might understand. Maybe you've had your own front row seat to someone you love falling apart. Maybe you know the guilt of choosing distance over involvement. I sure do. And if you stick around, I'll tell you exactly how her perfect day fell apart piece by piece while I sat powerless to stop it. Watching that disaster unfold wasn't entertainment for me. It was punishment. I chose not to be there because I couldn't handle the old fights, the pointed questions, the constant comparisons. I thought staying away would spare us all more pain. Instead, it made me the only person who watched her humiliation unfold without even trying to help. It's a kind of guilt you can't drink away. Trust me, I tried. Have you ever felt that? That sickening mix of relief and regret when you realize you dodged a bullet but left someone else standing in the line of fire? That was me, sitting alone in my apartment, hair curled, makeup perfect, wearing the dress I would have worn to her wedding. I wanted to be supportive from afar. Turns out you can't really hold someone's hand through a screen. All you can do is watch them drown. And if you're here listening to me spill my guts like this, maybe you know what that's like. Or maybe you're just curious how a wedding can turn into a horror movie in real time. Either way, I'm grateful you're here. Seriously. Take a second to hit that subscribe button if you want more brutally honest stories about families that look perfect on the outside but are falling apart on the inside. It means a lot. We're all just trying to figure this messy life out together, one cringe-worthy confession at a time. We all like to think we're better than the drama, that we'd never let it get this far. But the truth is, we're all experts at pretending things are fine until they're not. That's what my sister did. That's what my parents did. That's what I did. And then one day, you wake up realizing you don't even recognize the people you're supposed to love most. The live stream just forced us to see it in real time. If there's one thing I want you to take from this mess of a story, it's that silence is its own form of betrayal. I stayed quiet for years. I let my sister become someone I didn't even know anymore because it was easier than fighting with my parents or admitting we weren't close. Watching her wedding crash and burn wasn't karma. It was the bill coming due for all the things we never talked about. That morning, I tried so hard to make it feel like I was there with her. I cleaned my tiny apartment until it smelled like lemon cleaner, strung twinkle lights along the walls like some budget wedding venue, and set up a cheese board that would make Pinterest jealous. I even chilled the champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion, as if this counted. Because no matter what, she was still my sister. When I finally sat down in front of my laptop, I felt my heart racing like I was walking down the aisle myself. The live stream stuttered and buffered, taunting me with black screens and error messages. My palms were sweaty on the keyboard. I cursed my internet provider and wondered if this was the universe giving me a chance to back out. I didn't. I clicked refresh again and again until the ceremony finally appeared. There it was. Rows of perfect white chairs tied with blush ribbons, mountains of roses, guests dressed like they'd been curated by Vogue. My parents sat stiffly in the front row, my mom's handkerchief already dabbing at imaginary tears. And there was Bailey, radiant in lace and crystals, but with eyes that darted too much. Scanning the crowd for approval she was never going to get. Even through pixels, I saw it. She wasn't happy. Then the reception hit like a freight train. Secrets spilled. Voices rose. Someone knocked over a champagne tower in the background. Patricia hijacked the mic to drop a bombshell in front of 300 guests. And the moment Bailey realized her marriage was a fraud was broadcast straight into my living room, as raw and ugly as real life gets. I remember whispering, "Oh my God," to no one, feeling like I'd swallowed broken glass. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the stream froze. Her face, streaked with tears, full of rage and betrayal, burned onto my screen. It stayed there like a monument to all our family failures, to every secret we'd swept under the rug. I couldn't look away. I couldn't close the window. I just sat there, watching my sister's world burn down from 1,000 miles away, powerless to do anything but witness. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't just watching her get humiliated. It was realizing how many fights we'd had that led us to this point. All those passive-aggressive texts about dresses and diets. All the times I let Mom pit us against each other. I thought staying away would protect me from the drama, but all it did was leave Bailey alone when she needed me most. That guilt settled into my chest like a stone I couldn't shake. We weren't always like this. When we were kids, we'd build blanket forts and sneak ice cream from the freezer after bedtime. But somewhere along the line, she became the perfect daughter, and I became the problem to fix. It's funny how parents think they're helping by comparing siblings, when really they're digging trenches we spend decades trying to climb out of. We learned to keep score instead of holding each other up. And when she got engaged, I tried to play the supportive sister role, smiling at floral arrangement photos I didn't care about, offering polite wows in the family group chat. But it was all surface level. We hadn't had a real conversation in years. Every time I tried to tell her to slow down, to ask if she was happy, she brushed me off. So I stopped asking. I stopped trying. And that might be the part that stings the most now. Watching her wedding in that frozen frame forced me to face every moment I could have said something and didn't. Every time I chose to keep the peace instead of telling her the truth. Because the truth is messy and uncomfortable. It's a risk. And we'd both gotten too good at pretending. The live stream didn't just expose her broken engagement. It exposed how broken our relationship had become. I sat there in my dark apartment, lit only by twinkle lights and the cold glow of my laptop, wondering how we'd gotten so far apart. She was my sister, for God's sake. My built-in best friend. But in that moment, staring at her devastation frozen on my screen, I felt like the last person on earth she would want to call, and the only one who truly saw what happened. And that frozen image? It wasn't just a technical glitch. It was a perfect metaphor for our entire family dynamic. Smiles frozen in place while everything cracked underneath. The Sullivans and our family pretending to merge like it was some corporate acquisition, when really they despised each other. The wedding was never about love. It was about optics, alliances, status symbols no one would admit caring about, until it all exploded. Patricia's sabotage wasn't some last-minute mistake. It was the grand finale to a production that had been going off the rails for months. And Ryan? Don't even get me started. He played the dutiful fiancé while cheating with his old flame, signing prenups he hid from my sister, letting his parents orchestrate her public humiliation. Watching it unravel was like watching a horror movie where you're screaming at the character to run, but they can't hear you. My parents didn't come out unscathed either. Mom was so obsessed with perfect photos she ignored Bailey's stress. Dad played the peacemaker until he had to choose a side. And by then, it was too late. The wedding was supposed to be proof that our family wasn't dysfunctional. Instead, it broadcast every crack, every lie, every betrayal, in high definition. A cautionary tale for anyone who thinks ignoring problems makes them disappear. The truth is, you don't get to pick which secrets stay buried. Eventually, they claw their way to the surface. And when they do, they don't politely wait their turn. They erupt all at once. That's what I watched happen from my apartment. A lifetime of unspoken resentments exploding in one catastrophic afternoon, all because we thought appearances mattered more than honesty. Turns out the universe has a sick sense of humor. And as the stream froze on that chaos, I knew deep down this was going to change everything. There was no coming back from it, no sweeping it under the rug. Our family was exposed, raw and vulnerable for the entire world to see. And maybe, just maybe, That was the only way any of us would finally tell the truth, the only way we'd ever really be free. So that's why I'm telling you this. Not to air my family's dirty laundry for clicks or sympathy, but because I think there's something universal here. We all have that moment when the facade shatters, when the lies we tell ourselves to keep the peace finally blow up in our faces. Watching my sister's perfect day freeze into disaster forced me to confront my own failures, my silence, my distance, the ways I let her down. If you're still here listening, thank you. It's not easy to talk about this, and it's not easy to hear, but maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've watched someone you love walk into a mistake because you couldn't find the words to stop them. Or maybe you've been the one smiling for the camera while screaming inside. Either way, you're not alone. I see you, and I'm grateful you're here with me now. Honestly, I'd love it if you subscribed so we can keep having these messy, real conversations. Drop a comment if you've ever watched something beautiful fall apart because no one would admit the truth. And if you're feeling generous, there's even a super thanks button below. It helps keep this channel going so I can share more stories like this, the ones that remind us we're all just trying to figure it out. Look for it under the video and show some love if you can. Because this isn't the end of the story. Not for me, not for Bailey, not for our family. The wedding was just the explosion. What came after was the hard work of sifting through the rubble, deciding what was worth saving. And that's where things really get interesting. Because when the dust settles, you have to choose. Keep pretending or finally tell the truth. So if you're ready, stick around. Because next I'll tell you exactly how we got to that point. How years of small resentments turned into one catastrophic choice. And maybe, just maybe, how watching it all burn down was the first step to building something real. I always thought putting miles between us would make everything simpler. Moving away felt like hitting a reset button on the part of me that kept trying to measure up. No more forced smiles at family dinners, no more tight dresses to prove I had my life together. But distance doesn't really solve anything. It just gives you a better view of what's broken. It's strange how you can love people so much but also need to get away from them to breathe. I thought avoiding the fights meant we'd all be happier. Instead, it meant every hard conversation stayed buried like unexploded landmines. We avoided them so long they became part of the landscape. So when they finally went off, no one should have been surprised. Being far away made it easy to pretend everything was fine. Holiday texts, polite phone calls, commenting on family photos with heart emojis like it was enough. I convinced myself showing up for the big moments was what mattered, but I skipped the small ones, the real ones, the times she might have actually needed me to say, "Are you okay?" That's the trap with family you don't talk honestly with. You all perform your roles even when no one's watching. She was the dutiful daughter, planning the perfect wedding. I was the rebellious one who'd come around eventually, but we both knew those roles were paper thin. One good storm and they'd tear right in half. Turns out that storm was a wedding, the one I watched fall apart through a screen, a disaster years in the making, built out of all the things we never said. And as much as I wanted to blame the miles between us, they were only part of the story. The real distance was the silence. Bailey and I didn't fight in dramatic screaming matches. We did something worse. We competed in silence, comparing ourselves without ever admitting we were. Every holiday was a subtle scoreboard. Her engagement ring photos got the most hearts. My job updates were met with polite nods. We both knew it. We just didn't talk about it. She always looked like she had it figured out. The stable career, the respectable fiancé, the neat little life plan our parents could brag about. I was the one who couldn't be pinned down, whose choices made them worry. She was their proof they'd done something right. I was their cautionary tale. Even if they never said it, it hung in the air between us. We weren't close, not really. We were polite, careful, avoided topics that might crack the pretty surface. If she hinted at stress with Ryan, I'd make a joke instead of asking questions. If I sounded homesick, she'd send a meme instead of calling. We kept it light because digging deeper meant facing what neither of us wanted to admit, that we didn't know how to be honest with each other anymore. I know some sisters talk every day, swap makeup tips, vent about everything. That wasn't us. We learned early on to play our parts, smile for the camera, tell the family we loved each other. And in our own way, we did. But love that's never spoken out loud has a way of turning into something brittle, something that can shatter with one good hit. Watching her wedding fall apart wasn't just witnessing her heartbreak. It was watching the proof that our whole family system of pretending and pleasing had failed us both. She was the golden child who did everything right and still got burned. And I was the sister who saw it coming but stayed quiet anyway. We learned to compete before we even knew what competition was. Gold stars in kindergarten. Who could read the fastest? Who was the teacher's favorite? It didn't matter if we wanted it or not. Our parents kept score for us. Every win for her felt like a loss for me, and that resentment grew roots deep in both of us. By middle school, the gap felt impossible to cross. She was the one with honor roll certificates lined up like trophies. I was the one with art projects Mom called messy and friends she didn't approve of. I pretended I didn't care, but every comment stuck like a thorn. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack to my teenage years. Bailey never gloated outright. She didn't have to. She'd give me that tight smile that said everything without a word. I got good at pretending it didn't bother me. Rolled my eyes. Played the rebel. I told myself I didn't want their approval anyway. But the truth was, I just knew I'd never get it on their terms. So I stopped trying. College was my escape plan. Different state, different friends, no one to compare me to her. I thought distance would fix the hurt. But hurt doesn't care about zip codes. It just waits for you to slow down. Every call home carried that same old subtext. Every visit was a performance where we both read from the same tired script. When she got engaged, it should have been a chance to reconnect, to be sisters again, even if just for one day. But instead, it became the final act in our lifelong competition. And I didn't even show up. I just watched it all burn down from 1,000 miles away, realizing too late that I was part of why she was standing there alone. Leaving wasn't some grand rebellion. It was survival. I knew if I stayed, I'd suffocate under the weight of being the lesser daughter. Every family dinner turned into an interrogation about my future. Every compliment to Bailey was a subtle reminder of what I wasn't. So I packed my life into a hatchback and drove west, chasing a freedom I didn't fully understand. I remember the look on Mom's face when I told her, like I'd announced I was joining a cult. She asked about Sunday dinners, holidays, how I could just abandon family like that. But she didn't ask if I was happy. She didn't see how badly I needed space to figure out who I was without their expectations pressing into my ribs every time I breathed. Out in Denver, I got to be someone new. I learned to make rent stretch. I hiked trails and drank cheap wine with friends who didn't care about my GPA. I wasn't anyone's sister out there. I was just me. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch every time my phone buzzed with a text from home. But even from that distance, the family pull never really let go. Guilt would creep in on holidays. I'd force a smile for FaceTime, lie about being so busy to avoid tough questions. I convinced myself it was better this way. Less conflict, fewer tears. But all it really did was put miles between problems that needed fixing. Out of sight isn't the same as healed. And when Bailey got engaged, I felt the tug to come back. To show up, make nice, play my part in the family performance. I wanted to. I really did. But every time we talked about it, old fights would bubble up. Comments about my job, my relationship status, until finally I snapped and said I wouldn't come at all. And just like that, my seat at her wedding turned into a front row view of its destruction, from 1,000 miles away. It started so small. A phone call about bridesmaid dresses. Bailey wanted everything perfect, down to the last inch of satin. Mom made a snide comment about the fit. "You might want to try that diet I sent you." I laughed it off at first, but the words burrowed in. Another reminder that even as a guest, I was expected to be picture perfect, no matter how I actually felt. We fought like old pros. Bailey defending Mom, saying I was making it all about me accusing them of caring more about photos than people. It wasn't new. We'd done this dance before, blaming each other for wounds neither of us caused. But this time, there was a deadline. A wedding date. A dress that didn't fit the mold. And the unspoken fear that if I showed up, I'd ruin the perfect image they were selling. The words got sharper. Old resentments surfaced. I brought up always being the disappointment, the failure who couldn't keep a real job or a relationship. Mom called me ungrateful. Bailey said I was selfish, that I couldn't let her have one day without making it about my issues. In that moment, I felt every mile between us, even though we were on the same call. I realized nothing had changed. Maybe nothing ever would. I hung up on them in tears, shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The apartment felt so quiet afterward, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I remember sliding down the wall and hugging my knees like I was 16 again, back in that old bedroom we shared. But there was no one there to see me break. Just me, alone with the weight of every fight we never finished. Later that night, Dad called trying to smooth things over. He always was the peacemaker, the mediator who'd rather patch things up than fix what was actually broken. He suggested I watch the wedding online instead. Less pressure, he said, like it was a compromise. But it felt like exile, like they were telling me I didn't belong there at all. And I agreed to it because I was too tired to keep fighting. I told myself agreeing to watch online was the mature choice, that it would spare everyone more drama. No fights about dresses or diets, No forced smiles or biting my tongue during toasts. I could support her without being a target. But deep down, I knew it was cowardice. I didn't want to face them. I didn't want to face her. So I chose the easy out. When Dad offered the live stream link, I heard the exhaustion in his voice. Decades of playing referee between Mom's perfectionism and my defiance. I could tell he wanted peace more than anything else. And I was so tired of being the reason he didn't get it. So I said yes, hung up, cried, then tried to convince myself it was the right thing to do. In the weeks before the wedding, I kept my distance. I sent polite thumbs-up emojis to photos of table settings and floral arrangements in the family group chat. I didn't ask questions, didn't stir the pot. It was easier to be invisible than to risk another fight. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, feeling like a guest in my own family. The night before the wedding, Dad texted me the live stream link with a message that said, "Bailey wishes you were here." No apology. No acknowledgement of what we'd said to each other. Just a bandage over a festering wound. I stared at that text for a long time before replying, "Tell her good luck." It felt hollow, but I didn't know what else to say. I told myself I'd make it special anyway, that I'd show I cared, even from 200 miles away. I planned the snacks, cleaned the apartment, set up the lights, pretended watching on a screen was just as good as being there. But the truth is, I knew I was lying to myself. And when it all fell apart, there was no one to blame but me for choosing to be a spectator instead of a sister. The morning of the wedding, I woke up way too early, my stomach in knots even though I wasn't going anywhere. I paced my apartment, checking my phone like an anxious guest who'd forgotten the time zone difference. I tried to convince myself it was excitement, but it felt more like dread. I wanted to support her, truly, but I also couldn't shake the memory of our fight. I kept hearing her voice saying I always made things about me. I decided if I was going to watch, I'd do it right. I cleaned the living room until it smelled like lemon cleaner and arranged twinkle lights for ambiance. I even set out the dress I would have worn if I'd been there in person. It felt silly, but I needed the ritual. Like dressing up could make me feel connected, even if we were states apart. I wanted to prove, to her, to myself, that I still cared. I set up a little spread on my coffee table. Crackers, cheese, a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. I told myself this counted. This was still my sister's wedding, even if I was watching it alone on a screen. I wanted it to feel special, like I was really part of it. But every time I adjusted the lights or fussed over the food, I felt the ache of not being there for real. It's weird, the things you do to convince yourself you're not the bad guy. I took selfies in my dress to send in the group chat but never hit send. I worried about looking like I didn't care enough if I watched in sweatpants. None of it really mattered, of course. The distance wasn't in the miles or the clothes. It was in the things we hadn't said. The apologies neither of us had offered. By the time the livestream link went live, I was half sick with nerves. I sat on the edge of my couch, glass in hand, fingers tapping my knee. I told myself I was ready to celebrate her happiness, but deep down, I felt like I was waiting for something to go wrong. And I hated myself for that. Because what kind of sister watches her own sibling's wedding expecting disaster? In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the family chat turned weirdly formal around me. They shared photos of cake tastings and seating charts, but no one asked if I was coming. It was like they'd agreed to pretend I didn't exist rather than deal with the fight. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my chest tighten, waiting for another jab about my choices. But all I got was silence that said plenty on its own. Mom, of course, kept it polite in that biting way she'd perfected. "Hope Denver is treating you well?" she'd write. Like she wasn't furious I'd refused to come. She sent me a passive-aggressive article about supporting family during big milestones, and then pretended it was unrelated. I didn't bother responding. I didn't have the energy to fight with someone who'd already decided I was the villain. Bailey went quiet, too. She stopped replying to my texts except for brief one-word answers. No emojis, no exclamation marks. Just cold, clipped responses that made my stomach hurt. I wanted to call, to fix it. But every time I picked up my phone, I remembered the fight. Her saying I was making it about me. Me telling her I wouldn't ruin her perfect day. Those words were like barbed wire between us. Dad tried to stay Switzerland as always. He'd text me, "Love you," with no context. Like he could erase the fight with affection that came too late. He never picked sides, which sounds nice until you realize sometimes picking a side is the only way to really help. I think he was relieved I wasn't coming. One less source of drama to manage. One less daughter to keep from saying the wrong thing. So I stayed quiet, watched them plan without me, liked the photos, said, "Looks amazing," when it killed me to type it. I thought staying out of the way was the kind thing to do. But all it really did was give them permission to erase me from the day entirely. And in a way, I let them. I heard the rumors through cousins who loved to stir the pot. Bailey was apparently losing her mind over napkin colors and chair sashes, crying during vendor meetings, snapping at bridesmaids who didn't answer texts fast enough. It didn't surprise me, honestly. She'd always been a perfectionist, but weddings have a way of weaponizing that, turning normal stress into an Olympic sport of control. The family painted it as, Bailey just wants it perfect, but it sounded like she was unraveling. I tried to picture her yelling at a florist over the shade of blush roses and failed. I remembered her whispering secrets to me under our covers as kids, giggling about crushes. I wondered when that girl had learned to grit her teeth and tell everyone it was fine while steam built behind her eyes. Ryan's family didn't help. They had opinions on everything: venue, guest list, even her dress. Mom told me on a call that Ryan's mother had such refined taste, it would be rude not to consider her suggestions. As if Bailey hadn't been dreaming of this day since we were little. I felt anger rise in my throat, but instead of saying something, I bit my tongue. Another silence I'd regret later. Watching from afar, it was easy to spot the red flags. The way her texts became frantic. The way the family updates glossed over real problems. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but I didn't want another fight. Didn't want her to accuse me of meddling or being unsupportive. So I settled for liking her engagement photos on Instagram like everyone else, pretending everything was beautiful. By the time the wedding week arrived, she was in full crisis management mode. I could hear it in her voice the few times we talked. She was exhausted, worn thin from pleasing everyone but herself. And I just let it happen, because it was easier, because it was safer, because telling her the truth felt impossible. So I watched her build the bomb that would eventually blow up in her face. Our family always cared too much about what people thought. Appearances were everything. The right clothes for family photos, the polite smiles at church, the carefully curated social media posts. Bailey absorbed that lesson better than anyone. She made herself the ideal daughter, the one who never gave anyone a reason to whisper. And I think it broke her in ways no one wanted to see. Planning this wedding was her masterpiece, She wanted perfection so badly it hurt to watch. Every vendor had to be the best. Every detail meticulously chosen to impress people who barely knew her. I kept seeing the price tags in the photos they shared. Custom calligraphy, imported flowers. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a performance for an audience that would forget it by Monday. Ryan's family leaned into it, of course. They had the money and the old-school expectations that made my skin crawl. His mother was basically the director of the whole production. I heard she vetoed menu choices, redid the guest list, even suggested Bailey change her hair color for photos. And Bailey, she let her, because she was too busy trying to be the good future daughter-in-law to say no. Meanwhile, our parents acted like it was normal. Mom sent her Pinterest boards. Dad grumbled about costs, but paid them anyway. No one asked if Bailey was happy. No one noticed her smile looked tight in every picture. Or maybe they did, but it was easier to ignore, because nothing ruins a family event faster than admitting someone is miserable in the middle of it. I watched it all from Denver with a sinking feeling in my gut. I wanted to shake her, tell her she didn't have to do this, that love wasn't supposed to look like a press release. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, liked the photos, told myself it wasn't my place. And in the end, that silence was as cruel as anything I could have said. I treated watching the wedding like a sacred ritual. I wanted to prove, at least to myself, that I wasn't the heartless sister everyone probably thought I was. I spent hours cleaning my apartment, lit candles that smelled like vanilla and pine. I told myself if I made it special enough, it would feel like being there, that it would count for something, that she'd know I was trying. I set up my laptop on the coffee table, external speakers plugged in for better sound. I wanted to hear every vow, every toast, every forced laugh. I arranged a cheese plate with strawberries and crackers, poured the champagne I'd been saving for something worth celebrating. It felt performative, but I couldn't show up in person, so this was my stand-in. My attempt to bridge the miles I'd created. I even got dressed. Navy blue cocktail dress, hair curled, makeup applied carefully like I was actually going to the venue. It felt stupid at first, but also weirdly necessary. Sitting there in sweatpants felt too much like admitting defeat. I wanted her to see, if she somehow could, that I wasn't just checking in out of obligation. That I was trying to be there for her in the only way I knew how. I checked the time compulsively. Nervous energy made me pace between the kitchen and the couch. I practiced what I'd text afterward. You looked beautiful. So happy for you. I kept imagining her reading those words, believing them, even though we both knew they were layered with things we didn't dare say out loud. Regret, envy, sadness, guilt. By the time the live stream went live, I was practically vibrating with anticipation and dread. My apartment looked like a discount wedding reception. twinkle lights glowing in the dim light. I sat there alone with my fancy glass, pretending this counted. Pretending it made up for the fact that when she needed a sister at her side, all she got was me behind a screen. It's funny how distance can feel like safety until it turns into regret. I told myself not going was the kinder choice. That showing up would mean more fights, more tears, more reminders that we didn't know how to talk without hurting each other. I thought staying away was protecting her day from me. But really, I was protecting myself from seeing how far apart we'd drifted. I convinced myself that watching online was enough, that it was modern, practical, but it felt like exile the second I agreed to it. Like I'd accepted my place as the family disappointment who didn't belong in the perfect photos. Like I was admitting I couldn't be trusted not to ruin her big day with my presence alone. That stung in places I didn't know still hurt. When Dad offered the live stream as a compromise, I heard the relief in his voice. He didn't have to mediate anymore. Didn't have to watch us fight. It was so easy for everyone. No messy emotions, no honest conversations, just the illusion of support delivered through a buffer of screens and miles. I said yes because I was tired, because I was scared, because I didn't know how to fix what was broken. The worst part is I don't think Bailey really wanted me there by then either. I think she was relieved not to have to deal with me. No snide comments, no emotional scenes, no risk of me saying the quiet part out loud. Maybe she thought it was for the best too. Two sisters so good at avoiding conflict we just cut each other out of the biggest day of her life. And so I sat there in my darkened apartment, dressed up with nowhere to go, holding my glass like a shield, watching her world fall apart in real time, knowing I'd chosen to be a spectator instead of a participant, and realizing that no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun the truth of who we'd both become. When the live stream finally went live, I held my breath like it was a rocket launch, except nothing happened at first. Just a spinning wheel on my screen while my champagne went flat. I kept refreshing, cursing my internet like it was personally sabotaging me. 10 minutes in, I was sweating, heart pounding. This was my one way to be there, and even that felt like it was falling apart. I sat there in my too nice dress on my lumpy couch, tapping the refresh button with growing dread. Each second of silence made me more aware of the distance. I tried to imagine what was happening at the venue. Guests settling in, soft music playing, my family pretending everything was perfect while ignoring the empty seat with my name on it. I felt sick knowing no one would even mention me. Finally, the screen flickered to life. The video quality was too crisp, almost cruel in its clarity. Rows of perfect white chairs, ribbons fluttering in the breeze, mountains of roses arranged with surgical precision. It was beautiful in that expensive, impersonal way people use to prove they matter. For a second, I let myself believe maybe it would all go smoothly, that maybe I was wrong to expect disaster. But the sound kept cutting out. The camera operator swung wildly between scenes, and the tension bled through the glitches. I caught glimpses of my mom smoothing her dress, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, Dad tugging at his collar like he couldn't breathe. It was the performance they'd rehearsed our whole lives. Smile, pose, pretend. Except this time, I could see the cracks in real time. Every time the video froze, it felt like the universe giving me a moment to reconsider, to back out, to shut my laptop and save myself the pain, but I couldn't. I was glued there, glass in hand, watching like it was my responsibility to witness whatever was coming. As if not looking would be the real betrayal. So I sat in the glow of my screen, waiting for the show to start. As the camera panned across the venue, I recognized familiar faces that made my chest tighten. Old neighbors who'd watched us grow up, distant cousins I hadn't seen in years. They all looked so polished, like extras in a period drama. I wondered if any of them had noticed I wasn't there, or if they were just grateful to have one less source of drama to gossip about over their catered dinners. The guests smiled and waved at the camera, pretending this was a fairy tale. But even through the screen, I saw the stiff body language. Ryan's family sat in a cluster, designer sunglasses perched like armor. My mom's side huddled separately, wearing polite expressions that didn't reach their eyes. It looked less like a union of families and more like opposing sides negotiating a ceasefire. When the camera swung past the bridal suite, I saw Bailey in her robe, perched at a vanity while a stylist adjusted her hair. She looked stunning, picture perfect, but her smile was brittle, cracking at the edges. Her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. It hurt to see it so clearly, to realize she was terrified and no one in that room seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed and chose to ignore it. Her bridesmaids fluttered around, trying to reassure her with forced laughter. Jessica, her maid of honor, checked her phone obsessively, brows furrowed. Bailey snapped something at her I couldn't hear, her expression sharp, then immediately tried to smooth it over. I could almost see the script in her head. Be gracious. Be beautiful. Be perfect. Even as everything was threatening to fall apart, I wanted to scream at the screen, to tell her to run, to tell someone to stop this before it went too far. But I was just a ghost in my own living room, watching, helpless, a million miles away from the sister I was supposed to protect, and realizing with a gut-wrenching certainty that even if I'd been there in person, I'm not sure I could have saved her from this. When Bailey finally walked down the aisle, it was like watching a magazine ad come to life. The dress was gorgeous. Lace, beading, a train so long it needed 2 flower girls to manage. The guests stood in unison, phones held high to capture the moment. My mom wiped away tears that felt rehearsed. My dad stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to look at anyone. It was all so polished it made my skin crawl. Bailey's smile was the hardest part to watch. Wide, perfect, but so obviously fake it almost hurt to see. Her eyes kept flicking toward Ryan's family, scanning their faces for approval she was never going to get. She didn't even look at him half the time. It was like she was performing for an audience that was already bored, desperate to get the standing ovation she thought would make it all worth it. I felt this hot wave of shame in my chest, because even as I watched her get everything she was supposed to want, I was angry at her. Angry for wanting their approval so badly, for changing herself to fit their mold, for not fighting back. But beneath the anger was something worse. Guilt. Because I knew if I'd been there, I would have said the same biting things I always did, and maybe that would have been worse. The camera caught Ryan smiling at her, but even that felt hollow. He looked like a man who knew he was getting a good deal but couldn't remember why he'd signed up in the first place. His family sat there, barely clapping, stone-faced and judging every detail. The air was so thick with tension you could see it even through a glitchy live stream. It felt like watching a play where everyone forgot their lines. I clutched my champagne glass so hard my fingers ached. I wanted to turn it off, to walk away, but I couldn't, because that was my sister. And no matter how much we fought, no matter how far I'd run, part of me still loved her so fiercely it felt like drowning. So I sat there, tears pricking my eyes, watching her smile for cameras that would never show the truth. As the officiant droned through the vows, I felt like I was watching strangers recite lines they barely understood. The camera zoomed in on their clasped hands, and for a second I thought Bailey's fingers trembled. Ryan smiled like he was closing a business deal, not marrying someone he loved. It was so formal, so forced. I almost laughed. But the laugh died in my throat, replaced with something heavy and sad. I tried to focus on the details like it would make me feel closer. The flowers were pale pink, the exact shade Mom insisted looked best on Bailey. The string quartet played softly, trying to drown out the tension. My parents sat in the front row, rigid, pretending nothing was wrong. I wondered if anyone else noticed the way my dad kept glancing at the exit like he was planning his escape route. I texted Heather, our cousin who was there, asking if everything was okay. Her response was one word: drama. My stomach flipped. I wanted details, but part of me didn't. It was easier to imagine minor squabbles than the truth I suspected was brewing. I told myself not to overthink it, not to assume the worst, but I knew my family too well to believe it was all going smoothly. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, they kissed with this weird, stilted enthusiasm that felt like an obligation. The guests clapped politely. The camera caught forced smiles, people shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. I actually winced watching it, feeling secondhand embarrassment for everyone involved. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life. Instead, it was a transaction on display. I leaned back on my couch, the glow of the screen illuminating my tired face. I should have felt relief, like it was over now, safe. But instead, a cold dread settled in my chest, because it wasn't over. I could see it in Bailey's eyes, even through the screen. Something was waiting to break, and I was about to watch it happen in real time. As the camera followed them out of the ceremony space, the tension was practically a character of its own. The guests funneled toward the reception hall in polite little groups, but you could see the divide clear as day. Ryan's family on one side, dripping with old money snobbery. Our family on the other, tight-lipped and defensive. It wasn't a celebration. It was a standoff in cocktail attire. Even the seating chart was a political statement. Tables arranged with surgical precision to keep the warring factions apart. My parents ended up next to Ryan's father at the head table, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Mom's polite smile was strained, her fingers drumming on the linen like Morse code for "kill me now." Dad had that half-listening expression he wore when Mom scolded us as kids. The camera caught Patricia, Ryan's mother, giving directions to the planner with the confidence of a 4-star general. She adjusted centerpieces and whispered to staff like she owned the place. Bailey hovered nearby, plastering on her best hostess smile, eyes scanning for approval that never seemed to come. Watching it hurt. Like seeing someone drown while insisting they were fine. I noticed small things most people would miss. The bridesmaids exchanging worried glances. Jessica checking her phone again and again, biting her lip like she was reading bad news she couldn't share. Ryan drinking more than seemed appropriate this early in the evening. His laugh too loud, too sharp. All the while, the camera operator kept pretending nothing was wrong, panning across floral arrangements and monogrammed napkins. It felt like watching a powder keg get loaded one careful scoop at a time. Everyone performing their roles with brittle precision, ignoring the hiss of the fuse burning lower. I wanted to scream at them to stop, to just talk, to say the ugly, necessary things before it was too late. But they couldn't hear me. And even if they had, I'm not sure they would have listened. I sat there clutching my champagne glass, heart in my throat, realizing I was witnessing something I could never unsee. And if you're still here with me, watching this all unfold through my words, thank you. It's hard talking about family falling apart, but maybe you know what that's like. Maybe you've seen a wedding go from fairy tale to cautionary tale in the blink of an eye, or you felt helpless watching people you love make choices you can't stop. If you're finding any of this hitting close to home, or even if you're just here for the raw honesty, go ahead and tap that like button. It really helps more than you know. And if you want to keep hearing these messy human stories where we don't sugarcoat the hard parts, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This channel is about telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And hey, if you felt moved or even a little grateful for me spilling my guts here, there's a super thanks button right below the video. It's an easy way to help support the channel so I can keep sharing stories like this. Just tap super thanks and know you're helping keep these conversations going. It means the world. Truly. Even the smallest support keeps this space alive. We're not done yet. There's so much more to this story, because as bad as that ceremony was, the reception was worse. The real secrets didn't stay buried. The real fights didn't stay whispered. And I want you to see what happened when all those carefully hidden truths finally exploded for everyone to see. So stick around, because next, I'll take you through what it was like watching my sister's entire life unravel from the safety of my living room, and realizing too late that safety comes with its own kind of guilt. The camera cut to the reception hall like a horror movie pretending to be a love story. Crystal chandeliers glittered over tables stacked with overpriced centerpieces. Everyone looked perfect on the surface, but you could see the tension in the way they held their champagne flutes too tight. The seating chart had turned into a battleground, with my family corralled on one side, Ryan's family ruling the other like royalty. It felt like two separate weddings sharing one dance floor. Bailey and Ryan made their entrance to polite applause, but the applause died too quickly. I watched Bailey's eyes dart across the room, scanning for landmines. Ryan just smirked, clinking glasses and ignoring the cold stares. Patricia hovered near the planner, whispering with the urgency of someone trying to manage a crisis without admitting it's a crisis. Every time the camera panned past her, she looked ready to devour someone. I noticed the small betrayals the camera wasn't supposed to catch. Jessica leaning in to talk to the wedding planner, shaking her head violently. Ryan draining his glass, gesturing for another before he'd even finished. Guests whispering behind napkins, shooting glances that said everything their words wouldn't. It wasn't a party. It was an autopsy in formal wear. Everyone poking the corpse of their perfect day to see how bad the rot was. The toast started and I felt my stomach drop. The best man was already 3 drinks in, slurring through inappropriate jokes about Ryan's college conquests. Bailey's laugh was this high, painful thing that stopped too quickly. Patricia's face was frozen into something between disgust and triumph. Even the DJ looked like he wanted to crawl under his table. Every new word felt like pushing on a bruise until it burst. I sat on my couch in Denver, white-knuckling my glass, feeling like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. I knew the collision was coming. Everyone did. But no one stood up to stop it. And the worst part? Neither did I. I just sat there, thousands of miles away, watching my sister's dream turn into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Then came the announcement that made my blood run cold even from 1,000 miles away. The DJ cleared his throat and said Patricia had a special surprise for the happy couple. I watched Bailey freeze mid-sip, her fingers tightening around her glass until her knuckles went white. Ryan's smirk dropped off his face like it had been yanked. The entire room went silent, polite applause dying like a fire without oxygen. Patricia took the microphone like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Her voice dripped sugar while her eyes glittered like knives. She talked about love being full of surprises, how marriage was about honesty. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I wanted to throw my glass at my laptop screen, because I could see exactly where this was going even before the projector screen descended like a guillotine. The slideshow started innocently enough. Childhood photos of Ryan grinning with missing teeth, shots of him and his family on sailboats, laughing at exclusive resorts. Bailey smiled at first, tight but polite. But then the music shifted, and so did the photos. Suddenly there she was, Diana, blonde, perfect, wrapped around Ryan in frat party shots, cuddling at ski lodges, even kissing under Christmas lights. Each image felt like a punch. Bailey's face collapsed in real time. Her mouth fell open, eyes blinking like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Ryan tried to grab Patricia's arm, but she yanked it away, voice booming through the microphone that Diana had been part of the family for years. She talked about legacy, about understanding family expectations. I watched my sister realize she'd married into a family that never wanted her at all. The live stream crackled, the camera operator clearly panicking but refusing to look away. I couldn't look away either, even when Bailey finally snapped, dropping her bouquet and whispering, "Who is she?" I felt like I was spying on a murder in progress. The slow, deliberate killing of everything she'd built her future on. And I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. It was the kind of reveal you see in bad movies, except this wasn't fiction. The photos on the screen grew more recent. Timestamps showing ski trips from just months before the wedding. Parties where Ryan's arm was possessively around Diana's waist. Her handwritten sign in the final slide, "Call me when you're ready for the real thing." The room erupted in gasps so loud even the live stream mic picked them up. Bailey didn't move at first. She just stood there, staring at the screen like it was a nightmare she could wake up from if she blinked enough times. Ryan started stammering excuses, but they sounded thin even over the terrible audio. "It's not what it looks like," he kept saying, voice cracking like an adolescent liar caught with a bottle of booze. But there was no saving this. The truth was, right there in neon letters. Patricia didn't even look embarrassed. She looked satisfied, like a general who'd won the battle by nuking the entire city. She actually had the audacity to tell Bailey they'd all known Diana was the right match, that this wedding was a mistake. My mom's face was a study in horror, but she didn't intervene. Dad sat frozen, eyes wide, as if trying to understand how it all fell apart so fast. And Bailey, God. She finally snapped out of it when Ryan tried to touch her arm. She flinched so hard I thought she'd fall over. Then her face went slack, not with confusion anymore, but with understanding. She saw every lie he'd told, every promise he'd broken, every bit of herself she'd changed to fit his world. She realized all at once that it had all been for nothing. I watched her heart break in real time. I remember whispering, "I'm so sorry," into my empty apartment, like she could hear me, like she'd forgive me for not being there to drag her away from him. My screen felt like a cage, separating me from the sister I'd spent my whole life fighting with. But who? In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to save, and I couldn't. I could only watch as the worst day of her life played out for everyone to see. The moment that slideshow ended, the entire reception exploded like someone had lit a match in a gas leak. Guests started shouting, chairs scraped across marble, and glasses shattered on the floor. Ryan's father was on his feet, pointing and yelling about family embarrassment. My dad tried to stand up for Bailey, his voice cracking with rage I hadn't heard since I was a kid. The camera caught it all, the chaos unfolding in grotesque HD. Patricia lunged for the mic, shrieking that Bailey was ungrateful and unfit to marry into their legacy. Bailey just stood there shaking, bouquet dropped at her feet, eyes glassy with disbelief. Ryan was drunk and slurring, pleading with his mother one minute and yelling at Bailey the next. The room split into factions, our family defending Bailey while the Sullivans acted like she'd ruined their day by refusing to be humiliated quietly. I sat in my apartment, clutching my knees to my chest, feeling like I was about to throw up. The feed kept glitching, freezing on the worst possible frames, Bailey crying, my mom lunging forward, Ryan's mother screaming at a planner who was desperately trying to cut the mic. I could hear the crowd gasping, someone sobbing, forks clattering to the ground. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was open war. And then Bailey finally broke. I watched as she ripped the giant engagement ring from her finger and hurled it at Ryan's chest, missing and landing with a splash in a champagne fountain. She screamed so loud the mic cut out for a second, her voice cracking with years of swallowed rage. The camera shook as people scrambled back, servers dropped trays, and Ryan's brother lunged forward to stop her, colliding with a waiter who sent flutes flying like glass rain. Bailey didn't care anymore. She wasn't the perfect bride or the compliant daughter-in-law. She was done. She accused Ryan of lying to her for months, of planning this entire circus while stringing her along. She even read out loud hotel receipts Jessica handed her, the final nail in the coffin. Ryan just stood there, blinking in horror, champagne dripping from his ruined tux. He tried to say something, but his words were drowned in the shouting. Watching her like that broke something in me. For the first time, I didn't see the sister I fought with about everything. I saw a woman who had been humiliated on purpose, whose entire sense of worth had been used like currency in some twisted family merger. I wanted to climb through my screen and pull her into my arms, but all I could do was watch her burn it all down in front of the people who thought they owned her. The camera caught it all until, cruelly, it froze on the worst possible image. Bailey standing in the middle of toppled chairs, dress torn at the hem, tears streaking her makeup. Ryan was off to the side, face red with anger and humiliation, while Patricia pointed accusingly at my mom. The DJ had given up, the mic screeching with feedback, and the guests looked horrified, half of them filming with their phones. That was the last frame I saw before everything stopped. For a few seconds, the image stayed frozen like a nightmare painting. Bailey's anguish immortalized on my screen. I hit refresh until my fingers cramped. I rebooted my router. I cursed and sobbed, begging the feed to come back. I needed to know she got out, that someone helped her. But the tech failed me the same way I'd failed her by not being there in person to catch her when she fell apart. I sat there in my perfect dress, champagne warm and untouched, feeling like the worst sister on earth. Watching it from Denver didn't save her. It didn't soften the blow. It just meant I saw every raw second of her humiliation while being utterly powerless to stop it. And as that frozen image burned into my brain, I realized there was no fixing this with an apology or a plane ticket. This was scorched earth. When the feed finally cut out for good, I just sat there in the dark, my string lights still twinkling mockingly around me. The silence was deafening, filled only with my shallow breathing and the hum of my laptop fan. I stared at the blank screen like it might magically tell me she was okay, but it didn't. It just confirmed I was miles away, utterly useless when she needed someone to stand at her side. I spent hours trying to call anyone who would answer. My parents, Heather, even Bailey, though I knew she wouldn't pick up. Voicemails, texts, begging for an update, nothing. It was like the entire family had gone underground to hide their collective shame. I finally went to bed in my dress, makeup smeared with tears, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline that had already snapped. Lying there in that cold blue glow of my screen, I realized this disaster hadn't started with a slideshow or an affair. It started years ago with every lie we told to keep the peace. Every time we chose politeness over honesty. Every moment we let appearances matter more than truth. We'd all built that day together, brick by careful brick, until it collapsed under its own hypocrisy. I knew then that Bailey wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed. We'd both lost something. Our chance to be real sisters. To tell each other the ugly, necessary truths before it was too late. I felt the guilt settle in my bones, knowing I'd chosen distance because it was easier. Because fighting meant caring enough to risk the hurt, and I hadn't been brave enough to do that for her. When Heather finally called me, her voice was wrecked, describing the police showing up, the threats of lawsuits, the ruined cake. Bailey was at our parents' house, refusing to talk. I felt the tears rise again because I knew what that meant. She was building walls, the same way I had when things hurt too much. I recognized it because I'd taught myself the same trick years ago. That's when I knew I couldn't stay away anymore. Watching wasn't enough. Pretending we could mend things with distance was a lie. I booked the earliest flight home I could find, even though I had no idea what I'd say when I saw her. But I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let her face the wreckage alone. Not this time. Even if it was already too late to fix what we'd broken. On the plane home, I rehearsed apologies that sounded hollow even in my head. I kept picturing her tear-streaked face frozen on my screen. The moment her world ended while I watched safe and silent. Every mile closed between Denver and home felt like a reckoning. I knew this wasn't just about her marriage collapsing. It was about every time I'd chosen silence over honesty because it was easier. I realized then that I wasn't coming home to comfort her. I was coming home to confess, to admit I'd failed her as a sister, that I'd let my pride, my anger, my need to feel different and separate blind me to what she really needed. I didn't know if she'd forgive me. I wasn't sure she should, but for once, I was willing to show up anyway, even if it meant watching her shut the door in my face. When I finally saw her at our parents' house, she looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Hair pulled back, face blotchy, still in sweatpants she'd probably worn for 48 hours straight. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. We just stood there staring at each other like strangers who shared a history they couldn't untangle. My heart hammered so hard I thought she could hear it. Then she broke. Tears streaming down her face, voice cracking as she whispered she was sorry for everything. I grabbed her and held on so tight I thought we might both fall over. Me too, I choked out, words catching in my throat like glass. In that moment, All the years of distance, resentment, and competition melted into nothing. For the first time in forever, we weren't perfect daughters or enemies. We were just sisters. We spent hours on that back porch swing, the same one we used to fight over as kids, talking in half sentences that somehow said everything. She told me about the pressure to be perfect, about the way Ryan made her feel small and grateful for scraps of affection. I told her about feeling like the family failure, about leaving so I wouldn't have to see her win while I fell behind. We cried until our heads hurt. It wasn't forgiveness in that moment. It was understanding, an agreement to start over without the lies that had poisoned us for so long. We promised to be honest, even if it hurt, to stop protecting each other with silence. It was messy and raw and uncomfortable, but for the first time in years, it was real. And for both of us, that was enough to believe maybe we could find our way back to being sisters again. Those first weeks back home felt like walking through rubble, picking up broken pieces to see which were worth saving. Our parents tiptoed around us, trying to pretend nothing had happened, while the legal letters piled up on the kitchen table. But Bailey and I refused to play along. We talked late into the night, refusing to let the truth go unsaid. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the first real thing we'd shared in years. Even Mom and Dad started changing. Mom stopped pushing for perfect family photos and just let us sit in silence when words were too heavy. Dad finally told Bailey he was proud of her for standing up for herself, voice cracking with emotion I'd rarely heard. It was messy, awkward, painful at times, but in those moments I realized real families aren't perfect. They're just people trying, failing, and trying again. Bailey surprised us all when she said she wouldn't stay in Ohio. She wanted out, away from the whispers, the pitying looks, the constant reminders of what fell apart. She asked if Denver still had room for one more lost soul. I didn't even hesitate before offering my couch. We both knew it wouldn't be easy living together, but somehow that made it better. At least this time, we wouldn't be pretending. When she showed up at my apartment, bags in hand and eyes puffy but determined, I felt something shift. We set ground rules that basically boiled down to one thing: honesty, even when it hurt. She got a job teaching at a school that actually valued her, started volunteering at a shelter, even let her hair go back to its natural color. Watching her slowly reclaim herself was like watching someone learn to breathe after nearly drowning. We made Sunday dinners our ritual, but not the kind that demanded polite conversation and fake smiles. Sometimes we cooked elaborate meals. Sometimes it was just pizza on the floor with cheap wine and even cheaper jokes. We'd talk about everything: her therapy sessions, my work stress, the lingering guilt we were both learning to let go of. It wasn't pretty, but it was ours. Denver became our new start. Not a clean slate. We brought our scars with us, but it was honest in a way home had never let us be. We fought sometimes, sure, but we fought knowing we'd make up, knowing we were finally safe to be messy, complicated, human. For the first time in our lives, we weren't performing for anyone. We were just two sisters, figuring it out together, one imperfect dinner at a time. Bailey told me one night over cheap takeout that she was done trying to be anyone's perfect anything. No more bending to fit someone else's mold. No more sacrificing herself for approval she'd never truly get. She signed up for a photography class our mom once called a waste of time. Watching her hold that camera like it was a lifeline made me realize how long she'd gone without anything that was just for her. I felt it too. Seeing her take risks made me braver. I stopped apologizing for my own messy choices, for leaving home, for wanting something different. We both learned to forgive ourselves for the roles we played in each other's pain. It wasn't like flipping a switch. Healing was slow, uneven, but it was real. And for the first time in forever, that felt like enough. Our parents took longer to understand it all. Mom had to confront how her need for appearances hurt us both. Dad had to learn that staying out of fights wasn't always neutral. It was sometimes complicity. We had hard talks, fights that ended in tears. But slowly, the walls came down. Mom started asking real questions instead of giving advice. Dad actually listened without trying to fix it all. Holidays turned quieter, more intimate. No more grand displays for social media. Just us, cooking too much food, telling stories we'd never dared share before. It wasn't perfect. We still slipped back into old habits sometimes. But we noticed now. We apologized. We tried again. And somewhere in that effort, we found something better than the picture-perfect family we'd once tried to be. We found something real. Bailey still jokes that Denver saved her life, but I think we saved each other. We gave ourselves permission to be messy, to want more, to say no. Sometimes we sit on my tiny balcony with cheap wine, watching the sun set over the mountains, and talk about how we never want to go back to who we were. We're not trying to be perfect sisters anymore, just present ones, honest ones. I know we can't erase what happened at that wedding, the betrayal, the humiliation, the frozen screen that showed everything breaking at once, but we can choose what happens after. And if you've stayed with me through all this, thank you for listening, for being a witness. Because sometimes the hardest, most beautiful thing you can do is finally see the truth and decide to love anyway. If you made it this far, thank you for letting me share something so raw and personal. Family isn't always pretty or easy, and sometimes it takes everything falling apart to finally see the truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever watched someone's perfect life shatter and realized it was the best thing that could have happened? Drop a comment below and share your story if you're comfortable. Let's make this a space where messy, honest conversations are welcome. And if this hit home for you, consider tapping like so more people see it. Subscribe for more real stories that don't shy away from the hard parts. If you want to help keep this channel going, there's a little super thanks button right below. Just click it to show your support and help me keep telling these kinds of truths. No matter what, thank you for being here, for listening, and for proving that even the hardest stories can bring people together. See you in the next video.